Blessings, friends. Welcome back to High Kadosh Ministries, where holiness is a way of life. And Jesus of Nazareth is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And together God's people say, Hallelujah. Now our text this morning is going to be taken out of Genesis chapter 6 and verse 13, which reads, And God said unto Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Now we're going to continue looking into the book of Enoch to get a better clarification of this. And as we ended yesterday, we saw that the men of earth, as they were perishing under the rule and the annihilation of these giants, began to cry out to heaven. And that's where we pick up in chapter 9 today. So hopefully you're reading along with us. We're going to pick up in verse 1, chapter 9. And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said one to another, The earth made without inhabitant cries the voice of their crying up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men make their suit, saying, Bring our cause before the Most High. And they said to the Lord of the ages, Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages, the throne of thy glory standeth unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou. And all things are naked and open in thy sight. And thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Semjaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates. And they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and they've slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. And now behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended, and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass, and thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them, and thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. And so again, because these things are new to us, and yet there is so much packed within this chapter, let's back up and take a closer look at what this chapter is telling us. As we have mentioned in the past, there are degrees of hierarchy to the angels. And here we see four of the mightiest angels in heaven, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, look down from heaven, and they see the bloodshed upon the earth. Now, the reason that there's so much bloodshed, as we mentioned yesterday, is the giants are literally annihilating the men of earth. And we know that when we look over to verse 9 in the same chapter, which says, The women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. So the giants are not only teaching the men of earth their unrighteous ways, because they have learned it from the fallen angels, but they're also seeking to feed themselves and keep themselves nourished, and so they're feeding on the flesh of these men and women. And so it says in verse 2, They said to one another, The earth made without inhabitant. Why? Because men are being annihilated. And so the earth is almost void of mankind because of these giants. The earth made without inhabitant cries the voice of their crying up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, not the fallen angels. The plea is going forth to the holy ones of heaven. The souls of men make their suit, which is another way of saying they make their plea. Bring our cause before the Most High. In other words, bring judgment to us. We can't defeat them. They're too great and mighty, men of renown. If they are going to be defeated, it can only be by your hand. And so these four angels go before the Lord Almighty, and they say to the Lord of the ages. I love that, the Lord of the ages. We get so used to calling him God, we forget that there are so many names in the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, that we can refer to him by. The Ancient One, the Most High, the Almighty, and as it says here, the Lord of the ages. But now I want to point out something to you here, and I want you to bear with me. It says Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and again, God of the ages. You see, I'm going to suggest to you an idea that you have probably never considered, and I have to admit I never considered until I read this text today. But I want you to stop and think about this. Why is he Lord of lords? Why is he God of gods? Why is he King of kings? Because as we're told in verse 6, at the end of verse 6, it says, men were striving to learn these things that these fallen angels were teaching them. And why were they striving to learn these things? Because they want to make a name for themselves. That's what Genesis chapter 11 tells us in verse 4. It says, go to, let us build a city and a tower. They're talking about the Tower of Babel, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make ourselves a name. Men, like Satan, want to ascend themselves above the throne of God. And so they make themselves lords. They make themselves gods. They make themselves kings. And so the idea that I'm suggesting to you this morning is that before men were created, maybe he wasn't called Lord of Lords because there was no other Lord. Maybe he wasn't called King of Kings because there was no other king. Maybe he wasn't called God of gods because there were no other gods. But as men have set to establish for themselves these roles and titles, he takes the name King of Kings, Lord of Lords, God of gods. And if that's true, there's coming a day where he will no longer be King of Kings. He will simply be King. He will no longer be Lord of Lords. He will be Lord. And there's a suggestion of this at the end of verse 4, which says, thy name, holy and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. You see, his name is holy. Every knee will bow at the name, not the title. And so if we were to read this in the eternal understanding of this passage, it would say, and they said to the Lord, you are Lord, you are God, you are King. The throne of thy glory stands unto all generations of the ages. And it is thy name that is holy and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. For you've made all things, and you have power over all things. All things are naked and open in thy sight, and you see all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Here again is a passage straight out of the Bible, friends. Look at Proverbs chapter 15, verse 3. Where it says, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. Or how about Job 34:21? For his eyes are upon the ways of man, and he sees all his goings. And then again in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 13, which says, neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. Now again, Enoch was written far earlier than these passages that we just read out of the Bible. And so look again at what it says. All things are naked and open in thy sight, and thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel has done. Remember in chapter 8 it said, Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and he made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of fashioning them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, which is, again, metal that's used in alloys, and the beautifying of the eyelids. In other words, women how to make themselves seductive to men, and all kinds of costly stones and all coloring tinctures. And so it says, Azazel has taught all unrighteousness on earth, and listen, he has revealed the eternal secrets, secrets that were only for God. And because the angels were so many times in the counsel of God, maybe these secrets were made known to them. But he has revealed these eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. Why? So that they can become God, so that they can become Lord, so that they can become King. If they have all the wisdom of God, all the knowledge of God, why do they need God? That's their mentality. And as we stated yesterday, remember, the secret things belong to God. That's in Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29. And Simjaza, who was their leader, God has given authority to bear rule over his associates. So just as Lucifer requires permission to attack Job, Simjaza here has to have permission from the Most High in order to do what he's about to do on earth. And then it recaptures what we're told in Genesis chapter 6. They've gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, they've slept with the women, they've defiled themselves, and they've revealed to them all kinds of sins. And so basically it's saying, had it not been for these fallen angels, many of the sins that are committed today would not be committed, because we would not have known these eternal secrets had they been not made known by these fallen angels. And the women have borne giants. The whole earth has thereby been filled with their blood and their unrighteousness. And that's why their judgment is going to be so severe, even above man, because they are the initiators of these lawless deeds. And it's interesting we say lawless, because if you go back to verse 1, it says, as these four angels looked down from heaven and saw much bloodshed upon the earth and all the lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. You see, God's law has always existed. There's always been a rule that we're to live by. And when we abandon that rule, the restraint to hold us back and keep us from such devastating sins is unloosed. And then men are left to do whatever is right in their own eyes. And so these angels in verse 10 go before the Most High and they say, behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit, their plea, to the gates of heaven. Their lamentations have ascended, and they cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. So as long as these lawless deeds continue, prayers continue to ascend. And you, O Most High, you know all things before they come to pass. That almost seems like a charge against God. You knew these things were going to happen. Why did you allow them? And you see these things, and you suffer these things. You're God of the ages. Why are you allowing this to go on? That seems to be the charge. Because you do not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. And so the Most High certainly is not going to let these charges go without answer. Tomorrow we're going to discover what he has to say. It's almost word for word right out of our Bibles. And so friends, we see today that it was never intended for us to do such evil deeds, much less know them. God has always made himself available to those who will call upon him. And we should consider ourselves truly blessed that grace is passed upon us, because as often as we fail, his mercy is extended. And what you already know, yet you're going to see more clearly in this story, in the book of Enoch, is that grace is not extended to these fallen ones. Mercy is not extended to these fallen ones. And the cause of that is probably because much of what we do is done in ignorance. But these angels reigned in glory with God. They saw him in all his fullness. They knew his voice. And so they are left without excuse. And we do have somewhat of an excuse because we were born into this wicked flesh. These evil desires are ingrained within us. Our flesh is our ugliest enemy. And that's why so many of us look to the day where we put off this flesh and we step into glorified bodies. If we will obey the Most High, if we will honor his commands, if we will surrender to his will, if we'll bow to his lordship, that is the promise, friends, that we have to look forward to. And I pray that promise carries you throughout this day, and it puts a spring in your step and a song upon your lips, because you have much reason to glorify the Most High today. Now, as he wills, friends, and until tomorrow, I'll see you on the next video.